Okay, welcome everyone to week 3. This week we are talking about form, content, and context. Before we jump into this, I have graded your week 2 discussion boards on color psychology. Overall, really nicely done, everyone. Some interesting insights going on. And make sure that you are participating with peers and make sure you're really, answering each question on the prompt as that's where you're going to get full credit. I'm not going to, there's no right or wrong answers. It's more just if you're not getting full credit, it's because you're either not participating with your peers, it's late, or you're not really going through each of those bullet points on the prompt that I've given you. I've also looked at all of your image selections, and so those are in, so take a look at that. Make sure that your images have been approved. If not, please reselect, and if you have any questions about that, you can feel free to email me. And I will be looking at your mini art cyclopedias over the next several days, so I will have those done and back to you by Friday at the very, very latest. It should be in the next couple of days. And I'm not going to go over the quiz this week because I looked through the statistics, and you guys did pretty good. And plus, there's a couple people who still haven't taken it, so make sure you take those quizzes on time if you want to get full credit there. But you guys seem to understand that material pretty well, so kudos to you. Okay, week 3. You're going to be reading in your visual culture, and you're looking at art text this week. The looking at art text, again, is that simpler text. The visual culture one's a little bit heavier, and that's where we're doing most of our reading this week, so really just dive into it and don't be afraid. We're reading chapter 2 and chapter 4, so on form and ideology, because we're talking about form, content, and context this week. So we're going to talk about art in and out of context, and this word context is really important. And when we go through this, we're going to be looking a lot at Roger Fry and his 5 emotional elements of design. And this is the second part of your theory application paper. So we're going to be doing part of it on Panofsky and then part of it on Fry and comparing and contrasting those 2 chosen works of art. So in that text, who was Roger Fry? Make sure you look into that. And he talks about there is more to art than just imitation of reality. I've given you a couple of clips here that are just kind of, visual aids to go along with the reading. It talks about Jackson Pollock, so there's a really cool clip, video that was done on him when he was living years ago, and it was a very experimental film. It's short. It's only about 8-9 minutes long, I believe. There's a music video for the song Wonderwall by Oasis that it talks about as well here. And so there are 5 emotional elements of design are rhythm of the line, mass, space, light and shade, and color. So really take your time looking into these because this is, again, what you're going to be comparing and contrasting in that theory application paper. In the chapter on ideology, this is probably the hardest chapter that you're going to read in the book. And I'm not telling you that to scare you off. I'm telling you that because I want you to just go for it. You may not understand all of it. You may have questions in certain places. Don't mind my puppies rustling in the background. Hey guys, that's enough. But I've given you, if you're interested, this chapter talks a lot about a theorist named John Berger. And I've given you a playlist of his Ways of Seeing documentary series, which it's a whole, series of them. But if it's something that you are interested in, you're more than welcome to kind of, look through those. This is not required viewing, and you will not be tested on it. It's just extra enrichment. So he says that seeing comes before word. And what did he mean by that? He talks about making art of the past this mystic thing, this kind of holy relic. And he talks about recontextualizing the past. So, for example, if we look at the Mona Lisa, we've kind of elevated the Mona Lisa to be this great work of art, the most iconic work of art in the world, and we kind of go on pilgrimages to see it as if it were this religious icon. It's this cultural icon, and there's this idea of authenticity about seeing the original, and it's an interesting idea that he comes up with. And this chapter, I really like it because It gives you Berger's whole perspective, and then it kind of tells you that there are people who don't agree with him. So just because it's in a textbook doesn't mean we have to hold it as fast and true that this is the only way to view art, because these are theorists that are giving us ideas for how to understand art. So you may agree and you may not agree, and I want you to think about that. So context. Can a work mean something different for us today than it did for its original audience based on our knowledge of the world now? And it gives an example of Hans Holbein the Younger's painting The Ambassadors, and I've given you a short clip that you can engage with on that if you'd like to. Again, you won't be graded on any of this enrichment material that's ever in your reading assignments. You will be graded possibly on the reading assignments, but not on this extra enrichment material. Really consider the symbolism of an image, especially when we're talking about that painting The Ambassadors. Art being polemic. I'm not going to give you the definition of that word. I want you to really look for it and pay attention and do a little bit of your own reading there. He talks about Fuller's perspective and the politics of gender. How are women viewed in art? And I want you to think of this. What is a nude versus being naked in a work of art? And I, as an art historian, really think that there is a difference, and it's a contextual difference. It's looking at those historic, cultural, personal perspectives that change the way we understand a work of art. So, for example, looking at a classic painting of a Venus figure, someone that is, more representative of an idea than they are of an actual personage. So when we're looking at a Venus or Aphrodite type figure in a painting, they're not really given their own identity and personality. They're really more representing the idea of idealistic beauty, while someone who is defined as a specific person and are maybe in a specific context, they may be more of a naked figure in a work as opposed to a nude. So, and this is just, again, a theory. You may agree or not agree with that, but just something to consider. Look, they talk about Laura Mulvey in this chapter and viewing art from a male point of view, so pay attention there. And about Thompson's three-part analysis, that we have to look at the social and historical conditions in which texts are produced, and texts can mean artworks as well, right? The way they are received by real people, so by you and I, we are the real people receiving these, not just by the artists, by art historians, by critics. And our familiar close analysis to the text under discussion. So when we look at works and analyze them together in a group setting, that can kind of change our perspective as well. So a lot going on in this chapter. Just dive in. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. And speaking of this chapter, our reflection is going to deal with this. So you have two different prompts that you can write about. You only need to pick one. And again, these are our journal entries. So there are no right or wrong answers, but I want you to give me a good page of you analyzing these and kind of thinking through these theories. So number one is about Berger believing that we mystified the art of the past by making it into a holy relic. This does not mean that art is necessarily religious in its content, but that we treat it as such. Again, like we were just talking about with the Mona Lisa. We often go on pilgrimages to see famous works of art or treat the experience of viewing them in a ritualistic manner. Think about how you engage with art in a museum. We don't, go to a museum in our sweats. We're not loud. We don't sit and, eat chips while we're walking through a museum. We're respectful, right? There's a certain set of expectations. It almost becomes a ritualistic experience. So select a work of art that you think fulfills this idea of being a holy relic. Please don't use the Mona Lisa because we've already discussed it. Why? Do you think this is a healthy or unhealthy way to view art? Be sure to include the actual image of the work of art in your journal entry. So your second prompt choice, and I encourage you guys to engage with it. I think this is the harder one, but I think it's the more interesting one. So theorist and critic Laura Mulvey believes that when we are viewing art or watching films that the gaze is male. Do you agree? Support your opinion with evidence from the text. And just a little bit of insight here. What she's really talking about with the gaze as male, it's that we are culturally conditioned to view art from a more male perspective, whether we're male or female. Film specifically is what she's talking about here, and it happens a lot in painting as well. But that, think about it. The camera is a specific perspective, and the director is giving us, through what they're choosing to show and how they're choosing to show it, they're giving us a perspective to understand this through. And so she gives this pretty compelling argument, I believe, that, and this isn't in every case, and again, she's not writing in 2016. Her text is a little bit backdated, but it's still extremely relevant, I think. That we're kind of conditioned to view, especially females, through a male point of view. So interesting idea. So think through that. Okay, you have a theory application paper outline this week, and excuse me that this week's announcement video is getting a little long-winded. But every so often they will be a little longer than others when we've got a lot of material to get through. So the reason I have you write an outline for this paper is because a lot of you are so new to writing about art, and I want to make sure that I'm giving you the best chance at success here. So this is kind of a practice round, and this is where you're going to be doing the bulk of the work. I want you to basically write your paper this week. So anyone should be able to take your outline and write your paper off of it. So this is going to be a 6 to 8 page paper, right? So we want a really detailed outline. Like I've said here, the more complete your outline is, the more feedback I can give you on your paper. And please be sure to view the rubric for this assignment before you submit it. Okay, so I've given you a Word doc and a PDF version. You can download the Word doc and just use that as your template and just fill it in as you go. So this is worth 35 points. Be as thorough as you can. 35 points may not seem like a lot, but by doing this outline correctly and in detail on that paper next week that's worth a lot more than 35 points, you're going to be giving yourself the best leg up here. This is how I want you to format your paper. So I know I'm not giving you a lot of freedom in this paper. I'm keeping it very structured, but I'm doing that for a reason, because I want to walk you guys through what it's like to write about art, because it's really learning a whole new language. So I want a good introduction with a hook and thesis sentence. Really grab your reader here. Introduce your 2 chosen works of art. This doesn't mean you have to put the citation information directly into your paper. We'll have that with the images, but just give a brief introduction to these artworks and who the artists are. Introduce the theories that you will be discussing, Panofsky and Fry. This doesn't mean I want a whole biography on Erwin Panofsky and Roger Fry. I want just a brief introduction to who they are and what their theories are, because you have to think that your reader doesn't know. So you're the one that's introducing them to this. Okay, next we're going to walk through Panofsky, and you're going to do your first image and your second image, primary level, secondary level, tertiary level. That intrinsic tertiary level is where you want to make sure that you're including outside research, because when you go back and go over that Panofsky lecture, you know that this is when we're looking outside of the picture frame, right? We're not just looking at it and using our cultural knowledge. We're doing some research on that contextual, surrounding of that work. So there should be research here. Okay, in Fry, just going back to Panofsky really quick, really primary level should be that shortest, the secondary level should be longer, that tertiary level will definitely be the longest of those 3 levels. Make sure that you break this up into paragraphs. A lot of times I'll get students giving me pages of just a single paragraph. You want to make sure when you're starting a new idea, you're breaking it up into a new paragraph. That really helps your reader to break up those ideas and follow along with where you're headed. Okay, in Fry, I want you to look at a few questions before you go into the compare and contrast. I want you to think of how your chosen works illustrate the principle of the actual and imaginative life, and why. So just because a painting is abstract doesn't mean it's only representing the imaginative life, and just because a painting is naturalistic doesn't mean it's only representing the actual life. We can have a naturalistic painting that the scene was completely imagined, out of the artist's mind, right? We can have an abstract work that may be actually giving us a more authentic representation of what life is actually like, even if it's abstract in its nature, it may be giving a more real sense of emotion. So, how is the emotional impact shaped not by what is shown, but by how it is shown? This is where we're going to start looking at the tools in the artist's toolbox that perhaps an abstract work is going to be more emotionally driven because of the way that it's represented. It may not be. That's for you to discern. Then we're going to dive into those 5 emotional elements of design. So you're going to compare and contrast the two. We want to go through the rhythm of the line, mass, space, light and shade, and color. And if you're having trouble with any one of these, I am here to help. And then I want a strong conclusion. How have the theories of Panofsky and Frye been useful in discerning the meaning and emotional impact of the works of art? Don't skip this. I can't tell you how many times papers end right here. And that's not how we end a formal paper. We sum up those ideas, we wrap up what we've been talking about, and we basically show how we've given good information and good data to support this conclusion. So what else to include in your outline? Any quotes from the text or outside research that you are going to use in your paper, place these quotes under the number or letter in the outline that is relevant to where you will place them in your paper. So I'm assuming that here in that tertiary level, you're going to be having possibly some quotes from your research. Make sure you give your works cited section. Do it now. Get it done ahead of time. That way when you go to actually write out your paper and you're like, oh, good, I'm done, your works cited section's done too. That's always kind of the most monotonous part to do at the very end, right? So don't do it at the end. Do it ahead of time. I want your images with proper citations here in your outline. And remember, do not write in first person narrative voice. This is a formal academic paper, so no I, me, my. We're talking about research and supporting evidence here. So we're not going to base this on our opinion, okay? So again, you should be doing the bulk of the work this week. By week 4, when you go to write your paper, it should be actually very simple. So we have that, and then we have our quiz, of course. So we have quiz, we have an outline, and we have a journal entry due this week. Again, let me know if you have questions about this. I'm your biggest advocate. I'm here to help, but I can't help you if you don't engage with me. Have a fantastic week, everyone, and again, be looking for those mini art cyclopedias by Friday.